Okay. Everyone to the May 19th Design Review Commission. We're going to start our evening off with a reminder that we are still abiding by the Governor Executive Order N2920 that requires us to participate via teleconference. Locations are not open to the public. And if you'd like to join tonight's call, it is available on Zoom. The ID is 958-5554. 5035 and the login password is 104114. So we'll start this evening with our welcome and roll call.
Very good, Madam Chair. Commissioner Krelling.
Here.
Commissioner Gorney.
Here.
Vice Chair Valia.
Here.
And Chair Case.
Here.
And then for the record, Commissioner Killian is absent this evening.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move to consent calendar. So this is for any items that are not on our agenda this evening.
And there are none, Madam Chair.
Okay, so then we'll move to public communications. This portion is reserved for the comment also on items not on the agenda. Being as there are no items, I'm going to move us to public hearings. So our project tonight is the Oakmont of Shadelands Senior Housing and Residential Care Facility. Is there a staff presentation?
Hang on just a second. I just want to double check with our Zoom operator that there might be nobody trying to chime in feverishly for the public communication.
Go ahead.
Nothing? All right.
Thank
Chip
you.
says nothing. We're
Okay.
good to go.
Thank you for that. All right, I see Haley, so I think she's got a presentation for us.
Thank you. Let me load this up. All right. Yeah, my name is Haley Crawford. I'm an associate planner here at the City of Walnut Creek. And tonight I will be presenting the Oakmont of Shadelands project at 2800 Mitchell Drive and 1925 Oak Grove Road. The application number is Y20-034, and this is a study session tonight. So just to familiarize ourselves and the commission with the site, the site is comprised of two parcels, 1925 Oak Grove Road and 2800 Mitchell Drive. I'll go into more of the project details later, but primarily we'll be focusing on 2800 Mitchell Drive with some kind of minor improvements to Oak Grove Road. But in general, both of these sites are located in the Business Park General Plan designation and are within the Shadelands district specific plan. The site itself is located kind of at the northeastern side of the entire business park. And they both are zoned under the same plan development zoning, PD 2092. And so the project before us tonight is for a 254 senior apartment development and a 136 bed residential care facility. The proposal would be to split the lot at 2800 Mitchell Drive so that each of these unique uses is on its own parcel. And as I mentioned, there are some minor improvements to the adjacent site at 1925 Oak Grove Road, but the site use, which is a self-storage facility, will remain as is. There are no changes to the use or the functionality of that site. And so in order to implement and achieve the request for the senior apartment and residential care facility, the project does require a general plan amendment, and this would apply just to 2800 Mitchell Drive, which I have highlighted in purple, to change the general plan designation from business park to mixed use residential. There would also be a proposed text amendment to the existing language of the MUR to introduce a new FAR range of 1.0 to 2.0 for sites located outside the core area. This, if approved, would be the first site designated MUR that is outside the core area. The proposal would also remove just 2800 Mitchell Drive from the Shadelands specific plan. And because both sites are currently zoned under the same plan development, this approval or this project, if approved, would result in 2 new separate plan development districts. So kind of going into just a little more detail on the required entitlements and kind of the phases or steps of this project. As I mentioned, the general plan amendment and the specific plan amendment and the rezonings all will be reviewed by both DRC and Planning Commission, but ultimately would be up to the council for consideration, along with the tree removal permits. Obviously, we're here at the Design Review Commission tonight. The project does require design review and the parcel map, as I mentioned, for the subdivision into the 2 separate parcels. I also just will mention that there was a preliminary application that was submitted and reviewed by council back in November of 2019. That was, it was, a preliminary application. It was more just conceptual, seeking kind of general feedback from City Council on if introducing residential and residential care facility type uses in the Shadelands Business Park would be something that they would consider. I mean, they were generally supportive and provided some general feedback. And so now the applicant is moving forward with taking that into consideration. So tonight we're beginning at the DRC, as I mentioned, for a study session. Assuming that positive feedback and a recommendation is provided tonight, we will be moving on to the Planning Commission and then eventually a City Council. And then the project, if approved, will come back to DRC for final design review approval. So I'll now kind of go into some more site and project specific elements. So as I mentioned, there's 2 unique uses. The senior apartments are proposed at the eastern side of the site, which is at the upper portion of the plan. And there are 4 buildings there. And then the residential care facility will be a separate building at the western end of the site. The circulation is going to be shared amongst the entire site. Primary entrance will be through that center split driveway off Mitchell Drive, and then there's 2 secondary driveways on either end of the project. Looking at kind of parking and some more circulation, each building does have a garage that is accessed, a below grade garage that is accessed through various points that I've highlighted here. Each apartment kind of building or group of buildings does have its own entrance to an underground garage, and then the residential care facility has 2 entry and exit points. The project as a whole is complying, providing with adequate parking for each specific use. There will be 98 total parking spaces for the residential care facility, and that's divided between surface level and underground, as well as 467 parking stalls for the senior apartments. So now getting into a little more details of the senior apartment component, that parcel will be approximately 6.5 acres. Again, 254 apartment buildings that'll be restricted to age 55 and over. There will be 4 L-shaped buildings kind of clustered into 2 different groups with a total floor area or living area of almost 269,000 square feet. In the center of that is a 11,500 square foot recreation building. The 2 buildings at the rear of the site furthest from Mitchell Drive, buildings 1A and A1 and A2, are the only 4-story buildings on site. The height requirement is 40 feet in this area, and both of those buildings being the tallest, they do still meet the height requirement. And here are some elevations, a front and right elevation of those buildings. Again, they are L-shaped and they mirror each other in design and architecture. And the rear and left elevation here. And then buildings B1 and B2 are 3 stories, and these ones front Mitchell Drive, so are going to be more prominently visible from the street. And this is the front elevation, which I'll point out is actually accessed, my pointer, I don't know if I can see my pointer, but is accessed to the, from the east, so from the drive aisle. So when you're looking at the front elevation, it's not actually this, what would be the street elevation. the left elevation here on the bottom of the screen, that actually is the elevation that fronts Mitchell Drive. And again, these are this, L-shaped buildings, and that the architecture and design will mirror each other for B1 and B2. And then, as I mentioned, there is a 3-story recreation building at the center of the site that is shared, has a shared pool and amenities elements that will be available for all of the senior apartments. And here are some elevations, renderings of that building. So in general, staff is supportive of the senior apartment component and the site plan as proposed, but does have some kind of considerations and points that we're requesting feedback on tonight. One being that additional kind of architectural features be considered for the front or the street facing elevation of building B1. As I mentioned, the actual entry is not located on Mitchell Drive. It's off on the east elevation. And so staff is just kind of looking on getting just some sort of additional details to address the street, as well as requesting general just window details and material transitions to make sure that enough depth is provided for visual interest at the windows, and that all materials transition appropriately and return the corners in a detailed way. And then in general, staff is just seeking some feedback from the commission on the kind of general proportions and architecture of the recreation building. Although it's not going to be readily visible from the street, it is a component of the project. And so we're seeking some feedback on that. And then I'll move on to the residential care facility building. That will be located on a approximately 3-acre parcel. It'll have 136 beds, 3 stories in height, and almost 117,000 square feet, with, again, a central courtyard and some amenities. Here are some elevations. Again, the front elevation facing Mitchell Drive. And then the rear and the left elevation. Some of the items that staff is seeking feedback from the DRC tonight is some kind of further study and detail of the front elevation, including maybe simplifying some materials, looking at a uniform cornice element, and reducing the large amounts of stucco on the building, as well as requesting similar window details and material transitions as I previously mentioned. In general, the kind of color material palette for all buildings introduces some stone, horizontal siding and stucco, but staff is kind of seeking some feedback on if they can be simplified, or if certain elements can be used in certain ways to provide more architectural emphasis, especially on the Mitchell Drive frontage. And as I mentioned, there are some tree removal requests. The applicant is proposing to remove 106 trees. The city arborist, based on his ability to recommend trees on purely health and condition of the tree, can support the removal of 33 of them. 7 of them are highly protected, and 7 trees will be preserved. And so on this map before you, all the trees in red text are proposed to be removed. The ones with a red circle around them are the highly protected, and then the trees identified in white are the ones to be preserved. There is one offsite tree that's proposed to be removed, and so we will need approval from the adjacent property owner. And in replacement, the applicant is proposing to replant 631 new trees, as well as a wide variety of shrubs and grasses throughout the property. I've provided landscape plans here. The landscape plan for the entire site and planting plan was provided in your packet, but I have provided in my presentation the street facing or the street fronting elevations plans, so that you can see the proposed landscape plans along Mitchell Drive, which will be the most visible. But if we need to reference any additional details, we have the full set of planting plans. And so this is in front of the Rcfe building. And also as other parts of the project that will be included are some, general frontage improvements, public art, and signage. We don't have too many details yet on the public art, but I've included an image here showing a sculptural element at the front of the residential care facility building. The applicant will work with the Arts Commission to select an artist and to walk through that process. And then there will be 2 monument signs, one for each use. And so some kind of general details have been shown in the plan set. And I think, yeah, so I will just end with some project renderings that were provided by the applicant and just kind of give a nice feel of the project. This is the standing on Mitchell Drive looking at the residential care facility building. And just a different perspective. It gives a nice view of the portico share element that's proposed that'll provide a kind of waiting and loading area next to the main entry. And then now looking still on Mitchell Drive, but looking at the senior apartment component. This is the primary driveway, again, centered on Mitchell Drive, and there is a gatehouse element, more of just an architectural feature. And then there is, you'll see the gate further back into the drive aisle. And that's, as of now, is proposed to remain open during, business hours or visiting hours, and will likely just be closed at night. And this is just some images of the courtyard for the senior apartment buildings. And so tonight, as I mentioned, we're here for a study session. And so staff is just seeking and recommending that the Design Review Commission provide general feedback on the project and provide a positive recommendation to the Planning Commission and City Council regarding the proposed site plan, building design, color material palette, tree removals, and landscape plan. And the project, as I mentioned, will return back to the Design Review Commission for final design review approval. And so I'm here tonight if you have any questions. We do have several members of city staff here for questions as well. And the applicant, Deb Carbo, is available, and she has a presentation along with some of her staff as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So do any commissioners have questions of staff? Charles.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just found it curious that one, I think it was the 2800 Mitchell, was already zoned mixed use residential, and more of a curiosity, do we know how long that one's been zoned that way?
So currently both sites are actually, they're in the business park general plan designation, and they're in a plan development zoning. The plan development zoning, though, does not allow for residential. So this is the existing context and framework for both sites. So they're actually, as of now, neither sites would allow residential uses, which is why the project does require the general plan amendment and the rezoning that would allow this use.
Okay, I misinterpreted. My apologies, and thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Gorney.
Am I unmuted, I hope?
Yep.
I have a question you may or may not know. Do you know what the FAR of the Viamonte project is a couple blocks away?
I don't know offhand. I can see if I can try to find that and get it to you later in the meeting.
Okay, and if it is standard MUR, it would probably have a 1.0 FAR. I mean, that's a standard MUR zoning, correct?
So this currently it would not be MUR. The Viamonte project would not be. I don't believe. I can check that. I believe it's probably MUC. As of now, there are actually no MUR designations outside of the core area.
Okay.
And so this would be the first project outside of the core area, which is why the proposed new FAR range of 1.0 to 2.0, which is consistent with the MUC FAR ranges, would be new for just projects outside of the core area.
Okay, so MUR would not have a 2.0, but MUC would. Okay, that's trying to get my arms around that. We were given a copy of the objective design standards checklist, which we had developed, and I know that we can't do this under the state guidelines, which would not require design review. But have you gone through that checklist and verified it all, the things that are, checked off on that?
Yeah, so the applicant, the attachment that was provided, the applicant has completed. Staff has done a pretty thorough analysis of that, but admittedly, if it were under an SB 330 process, we would probably just want to do a little bit more just to make sure that in fact every single elevation was meeting, or every single detail was meeting it. But it appears that they are generally meeting.
Okay.
But you're right, it is actually not subject to SB 330.
Yeah, I was looking at a couple of things there that seem kind of not quite making it, but I won't go into detail on any of those. Last thing for me is, again, we're being asked to do a conceptual review, and we have, fully worked out grading plans, C3 utility plans, details, tentative map. And as a commission, we've asked many times if somebody's going to get a study session that we see it early enough to be able to study it. I'm just curious as to, again, why we got a fully detailed set of plans that when we've asked many times to not have that for study sessions. I mean, maybe sometimes the applicant requires it, sometimes the city does. I'm just curious in this case.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fine line of what we request so that we have enough information to analyze the project and to make sure that things are going to work, and then what the applicant chooses to submit and how much detail they choose to provide. Mm-hmm. So I mean, some things that were submitted obviously are requested by the city and needed so that we can make sure that all the project details will work.
Yeah, so that's the thing we've asked for before, is that we always assume that the applicant can make them work. It's always interesting to get something this far worked out. It seems like all we're being asked now is like the wallpaper on the walls, and as far as the site plan and everything else, it'd be very hard to change any of it at this point because it's so far worked out. So again, I'm a little disappointed we didn't get something earlier. That's my only questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. Carlos, do you have any questions of staff?
Yes, I do. Haley, just for the sake of getting a sense of scale, do you know the length of those any side of those L's in B1 or A2?
Let me see if I have a scaled plan here. I can get that for you in just 1 second when I pull. I can pull.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that you had it because I think it's a huge building and one entrance. So I just want to go ahead with the presentation, and probably this will be answered ahead. So.
And
quite concerned about the scale.
The project architect is here tonight too, and so I'm sure that he can speak to that.
Great.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Why are they pursuing the removal of the offsite tree?
There are impacts from the development to the tree that would otherwise make the tree either damage the health of the tree, make it potentially unsafe due to adjacent grading or construction and things like that. There was an arborist report that analyzed kind of the impacts of all trees. And so the specific of each number was included in there, but essentially it would be impacts from the construction of this project, because it is relatively close to the property line, that would cause future damage to the tree to where it could potentially be unstable or be a concern.
Okay. And then I noticed in the architecture package, there's an open space exhibit that shows a 20 by 20 red square at living room and the 10 by 10 square at bedroom. What is that telling us?
So our MUR and MUC zoning does require for kind of general light, air, and privacy reasons that there be a square, or what we call a court, of uninterrupted kind of airspace along building or bedroom windows and living room windows. And because this project is residential, they are showing that kind of in good faith to show that they are meeting some of those requirements, but because it's a plan, they're requesting a plan development zoning, they aren't actually subject to, or would not necessarily be required to provide those if city council, approves their plan development zoning otherwise. And so that exhibit is showing that they are providing some of the courts in accordance with what would be required if they were in a traditional mixed use zoning. But they aren't able to provide all. And so it would be wrapped up. Those development standards are going to be included in the PD zoning for council ultimately to consider. But obviously we're looking for DRC's comments on it that will go to council. So if there are any comments or additional questions, those can be included in analysis to council.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have questions of staff? Great, so we're gonna move to the applicant presentation, please. Hi.
Hi, are you, okay, I'm ready.
We're ready.
Let me share my screen. Okay, I'm gonna try and, Chair Case, Commissioners, I'm Deb Carbo with Hull Equities, and I'm gonna try and avoid repeating something, that Haley already went into. What I'm gonna start with here is the Shadelands Business Park, 248 acres, 104 properties, 3.2 million square feet. In 2014, it was 40% vacant. And by 2018, because of the work of the PBID and the city, the vacancy went down to about 19%. Currently, we're showing the vacancy at about 22%. Here are the businesses that are in the Shadelands, and this is the proximity of the site to the businesses. It's interesting that, the Shadelands has all kinds of unique businesses, but the most prevalent clearly is medical. And I wanted to show that. This slide actually is something I created based upon what I know has required in the Shadelands a general plan amendment and rezoning. And I feel like, and there might be more, but these are just the ones that I'm aware of. And I feel like all of these projects contribute to the health of the Shadelands. So let's talk about the site. It's 2800 Mitchell, 9.5 acres. Haley went into the PD. The prior tenant was the US Department of Energy's Joint Genome Institute, and Hull Equities did a very custom building for them in 1997. The lease expired January 31 of 2020. And we marketed the property, of course, a couple years before we knew they were leaving. They built a building on the Berkeley campus, but we didn't have success. And the original construction, this whole entire site here was originally in the 1960s developed by Dow Chemical. We hired a broker because we worked hard to try and find a biotech life science tenant to backfill the space. And this person specializes in that area. And he basically said, despite the excellent demographics in Walnut Creek, that it's not attractive to biotech or life science, primarily due to the industry maturing in close proximity to leading universities and research institutes, hence the new building of JGI on the Berkeley campus. And also Shadelands is considered a secondary market due to the distance from BART and Highway 24 and 680, which we all know. The building quality and infrastructure, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing is outdated at the end of its useful life. The genomic sequencing that was done here was actually a light lab use. So it's hard to backfill it with a use that would require, wet lab benches, fume hoods, and those types of things. Also, shipping and receiving for life science lab facilities require dedicated areas for hazardous materials, and this building doesn't have that and didn't with JGI. So the overall conclusion was that given the locational challenges and the major investment in the building, compared to the current rents in the Shadelands, that it is, unlikely that you'd find a life science biotech user. So we put our thinking caps on and took into consideration the challenges in East Walnut Creek and tried to come up with an alternative use that would benefit everyone. Traffic out there is always a concern, and vacancy in the Shadelands has historically been a problem. So we came up with senior housing, and for these reasons, and I'll go into specifics now. The demographics in Walnut Creek, Walnut Creek has an older population than the surrounding region, with a median age of 48.6, which is a full decade older than the median age of the region's population of 38.2. And even if you take out Rossmore, Walnut Creek still has a higher median age. And therefore, because of the aging population, studies show the primary market area will generate significant age-restricted rental demand over the next few years. Senior housing properties in Walnut Creek are at capacity, and many have wait lists, and with no availability, we're sending our seniors to surrounding communities such as Stone Creek in Pleasanton, which is a beautiful facility. This is the community benefits of having senior housing on this site. Traffic, one of the main concerns of the residents in East Walnut Creek. When we did the Orchards project, the stakeholder group actually came up with senior housing as a good use because it's a low traffic generator compared to an office campus of the same size. Seniors don't affect the boundaries for school registration, which has long been a concern of families surrounding the Shadelands. Medical, another senior project in the Shadelands, in addition to the Viamani project, creates an opportunity for further expansion of the healthcare businesses in the Shadelands, which is a really healthy part of the Shadelands community, creating new jobs and absorbing vacant space. The Climate Action Plan, I wanted to mention this because in 2012, the city adopted the Climate Action Plan, and it has strategies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and states a goal to reduce vehicle miles traveled, and specifically looks to the Shadelands to develop innovative ways to do so. And we believe this is very innovative. Senior live, work, and play. The resale market housing inventory, when a senior downsizes, they free up their single family home in the resale market to younger families, larger, and they can live and work in Walnut Creek. According to the Walnut Creek Economic Market Analysis, 52,000 people, resident workers, commute into Walnut Creek on a daily basis. And then, of course, seniors are allowed to stay an active member of their community. The synergies in the Shadelands are obvious. The retirees or volunteers at schools, hospitals, and nonprofits, many of which are in the Shadelands. There's significant medical offices in the Shadelands, I showed you earlier, doctors, dentists, so seniors can walk to their appointments. There are hospitals, urgent care centers, surgery centers, skilled nursing facility, surgery recovery centers, and then of course, grocery shopping, pharmacies, and restaurants to serve their daily needs. And in the Shadelands already, many of the businesses have active programs for seniors, such as Rcfe and the Sports Mall. So we set out to find a high quality senior housing developer, similar to the Sequoia Living that built the Viamonte in the Shadelands. And we chose Oakmont Senior Living. They're a local Bay Area family-owned company, and they've planned, developed, and operate more than 50 retirement communities in the Western US. So you can, including Oakmont and Concord. So you can say, they're an expert in their field, which is why they didn't cut corners on the plan. So I want to talk about the actual project, but I want to start with where we are now and where we began. We met with City Council in November of 2019, and they voted to allow us to proceed with a general plan amendment and rezoning. So for the ensuing 10 months, we worked with staff on an application, what it was going to take, how we needed to study traffic, and we, did a few different versions of traffic. We submitted the first formal application of the plans to the city in September. We received comments a month later. We resubmitted responding to all of their comments in March of this year. And this is just mentioning a couple of them. We removed a floor on the apartments because we were having trouble with the height up on Mitchell, which is the high point of the site. We increased sidewalk widths to 5 feet, and we improved the elevations of the Rcfe. We received more comments from the city, and we're before you tonight. So let's talk a little bit about the project. I won't reiterate everything that Haley just said, but what I can tell you is that we worked very hard to comply with the objective design standards. And the FAR is 1.1. In answer to your question, Commissioner Gorney, Sequoia Living at the Orchards is 2.0. I won't go into the parking. Haley already did that. The trees, the Oakmont projects, you can Google, they've got websites for all of them, but they're a huge advocate of lush landscaping. They feel that that's what their resident wants. And so while we're removing 106 trees, they're planting 631. 507 of those are 24 and 36 inch box, and then 148 are 15-gallon trees. I wanted to talk real quickly about the elevations of the Rcfe. So in that 10/1/20 incomplete letter from the city, staff said they're supportive of the apartment building elevations as they are well articulated with several wall planes and incorporates a variation in material and projections, such as the railing system. However, they wanted to see improvement in the Rcfe. So we refocused the design of the Rcfe to be more synonymous with the rest of the project. So that's kind of the backstory. And, we captured elements from the apartments and applied it here. The elements are oriented in a vertical direction. We added stone veneer in place of some of the stucco, metal awnings to give it depth and relate to the deck railings. The paint colors were revised to complement the apartments. And when all that was done, the porte cochere, needed to be reduced to make it more inviting and open and airy, which was done. So I'll just flip through these really quickly because Haley already shared these with you. And this is the courtyard, the rec building. I do want to point out that we did present to the owners in the Shadelands, and the new president of the chamber wrote a letter in support of the project as a result of PBID, but PBID voted to support the development. So with that, we look forward to your feedback. And the architect, landscape architect, civil, they're all here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's bring it back for questions for our applicant. Joseph.
I have a few. What about transit? I didn't see any kind of bus stop out in front. Is there transit available for these people to be able to move to other parts of the city?
There are actually quite a few bus stops because you recall the PBID has Route 7 that's a free shuttle to BART. Mm-hmm. And there are literally 3 bus stops, 2 on the Mitchell side of the street and another one across the street. The proposal, actually staff has asked us to improve the bus stops, 2 of the bus stops, I believe, on Mitchell. So yes, there are bus stops.
Okay. In the landscape, are there, I see a lot of walkways. I see a lot of pictures of walkways. I don't see a lot of places to stop and benches and places. A lot of people of this age have a hard time walking that far in the sun. Is there going to be any, additional areas to stop and rest for people?
They've got benches spread throughout, Commissioner Gorney. Maybe we can, by the time we come back next time, we can do some better slides that emphasize those areas.
What is the use of the gatehouse? Is it for people to drive up and say hello and get let in during the day, or is it some of them are just?
It's Brandon at Oakmont is on the line with, or on the Zoom with all of the team. So you guys feel free to weigh in, but the gatehouse is a lovely architectural feature, and it just gives the residents a sense of security. And the gate is actually behind the gatehouse. Right. So it's really an architectural feature.
Okay, so because it seemed like with the big roof, we hard to pull up next to it and talk to somebody.
Yeah,
but it's far away, so okay.
It doesn't house a person.
Got it. I noticed you didn't use the rear access that goes for the one that connects to the self-storage. Was there no reason to? Fire department didn't need it or anything? There was no.
There is no rear access to this site.
Well, there is now. I mean, you can drive out onto that driveway. So you can drive out onto the road to the self-storage now.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the fire department wanted anything on that. Or if you needed it.
Oh, the fire. We have things that we're working through with the fire department, but that's not one of them. The fire department felt like the circulation is good. Actually, what we're doing with the fire department is proposing a couple of additional standpipes, honestly, between the buildings in those courtyard areas. They're just outside the 150-foot pole. And rather than push back on that, we decided to just add some additional standpipes.
Gotcha.
So,
a question on in general on, I always expect pools to have covers on them when people can fall into them. I'm assuming this is fenced as an area and gated, so if people need to get in there, they can close it at night and it doesn't need to be covered in any way.
Brandon, can you have your landscape architect answer that question?
Hey, this is Jennifer.
Okay, good.
Could you ask the question one more time, please?
I was wondering whether, I always expect pools like this to have covers on them, automatic covers. I'm assuming there's fencing around it and gates.
Yes, it's hard to see at this scale, but there's metal fencing around the entire pool area with gates, and they'll need a passcode to get in. And then it will have a pool cover that will roll up.
Okay. And a question on trees, the ones at the very back of the site where the parking is, there was no way to save more of the existing trees back there, or are they just not in very good health?
What ended up happening is with the underground garages, there's some pretty extensive grading happening to be able to get the car from the street level then down into the garage. And then there's also with area that was left over, we needed to be able to do stormwater treatment.
Gotcha.
So where we can, we are definitely, but it just made it very difficult.
Okay, I understand that as an architect. For the architect, was there ever, the project seems very maxed out on the site, and I appreciate the fact you took a floor off, probably the front 2 buildings. Was there ever just a study model of the overall site done? I see just to get a sense of the massing of the whole thing.
For the architect, I'll take a shot at it, but while the architect.
This is Nate, if you can hear me. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, great, we're live. Typically, we don't do physical rendering models, if you will, where you old cardboard.
Not a physical model, I'm talking about a conceptual digital model.
We have, and we've provided some of those renderings in the package as well.
Right, well, you have very detailed ones, but you don't get a sense of the overall scale of the site from any of them. So I was just wondering if you did one and if in the future we might see that. I would have liked to. have
It's
seen
something that we can definitely provide. It is not something that we currently have
Okay.
available.
I'm sure if it goes through all the departments, we'll just be looking at the surfaces, so it'll be too late by then.
So
And-
Joseph, I'm
yes.
sorry, Commissioner Gorney, are you asking for a massing model?
A massing model would have been nice for a project of this scale, yes,
Okay,
definitely. At this point, again, if we had seen it as a study session, it might have been something we asked for earlier. And again, we're pretty deep into the project now, and I'm assuming it's probably going to move forward, but it would have been nice to see it, to understand the overall scale, the space between the buildings a little bit more, because the plan doesn't really do it, and either do the renderings. Last question. This is a hard one to ask. Actually, I have two more questions. Well, first I'll ask the architect. There's a couple of blank walls at the rec center facing the pool, one of them in the middle with kind of a fake stucco arch. I know that the one to the right of that is the theater, and it makes sense not to have windows in the theater, but it seems like the one in the middle, which is really glaring, isn't that like the exercise room or something? Is there anything that could be done with that so it's not just a blank arch?
you're talking about this one?
No, the upstairs. Second
Oh,
floor,
oh, I see here.
the big ugly one. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's something that did come to light once we had the renderings finalized.
Okay.
Because as you were saying, as you look at things in plan, they don't necessarily translate 100% as you vision them on in 2 dimensions. So where the theater is, we were considering doing some false windows that kind of mirror the opposite side there. And then we're also, yeah, would absolutely take in consideration doing some sort of window or another decorative element there at the center at that fitness room once we kind of determine what the actual usage of the space will be.
And is the upper one a doors out to a balcony just above that?
Yes. Kind of the nice large La Cantina doors where the 2 center pieces
Okay.
will open up.
Perfect, thank you. I got one last question for Deb. It's probably more of a planning commission thing, but I heard through the grapevine that there's contaminated soil on the site that has to be cleaned, but
We did.
includes a regular housing project, but it can be senior housing. I was confused.
It's a restriction. When Dow Chemical sold the site, there is a little bit of cleanup that has to occur. We've done very extensive phase 1 and phase 2, and there is a little bit of dirt off haul. It's not significant. I'll have to pull together more information about that. Thanks for the question, because now we can be prepared for it at Planning Commission.
Yeah, I think it'll be more of theirs, but I thought I could bring it up now.
Yeah, no, but thanks for that, because I'm not prepared to talk about it right now. But there was a restriction on housing by Dow Chemical when they conveyed the property, and it could only be senior housing ever. So I thought that was interesting.
Okay. I have one question for the architect, and then I can move on. How would you describe the architecture stylistically? I mean, this is a great shot to look at, because I think our apartments themselves look very good here. There's a lot of articulation, the balconies and everything else, but how would you sort of describe it overall?
I would say overall, we're looking at a contemporary meets modern design.
Okay. There's a couple little things I have to ask you about, like on A0.0. I don't know if you can pull that one up or not.
Haley, do you want me to stop sharing and you can pull it up?
I do have my notes in front of me. A0.
Yeah, you can open it up to that sheet if you want. If you can't pull it up, it's fine.
I'm sorry, A0 point.
A0.0. The colored elevations of building A.
Oh.
I can pull it up too.
Oh, okay. Here, I'll stop sharing, Haley, and give it to you.
Give me 1 second to get it loaded.
Where is my last question?
With minimal.
Just to confirm, we're looking for the colored elevations.
Yes.
This is the front and right, and I also have the other ones on another page. So let me know which ones you're looking for.
Yeah, this is the one. I just have a question about that piece on the right that has the 20-foot tall stone columns and then kind of a cap and then a arch top piece. I mean, I guess you're driving it at breaking up the architecture with some sort of an asymmetrical connector in some way.
Yeah, it's more designed to be, yeah, the asymmetry, but also just to be different from the rest of the building, because that is the main entrance into that complex.
It is. The main entrance is just to the left of it, the little curved piece. Is that the one?
The one on the first floor, the little one is the one of the exit stairways. And then,
okay.
so just in between those large stone columns takes you into the front, the lobby with the elevators and all of that. So we wanted to kind of draw the attention and focus to where you would need to enter the building.
Okay, we'll discuss that one a little bit later. And then the one on the right of it is an elevator tower, the one with the flat cap on it.
That is actually a vent tower to get the ventilation out of the garage below.
Okay. Oh, okay, I get it. All right, that's it. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Carlos, do you have questions of our applicant?
Yes, I do have a few questions, or probably a couple of questions only. So the first one is, I would just like to listen to the highlights that make this building unique for seniors. I mean, besides giving them a recreation center and everything. Like, I mean, I know universal design is a big topic. How does this building respond to seniors, architectural? That's for the architect.
Oh, okay. We can talk about amenities. Are you talking about the actual architecture?
Well, you can talk about the amenities as well, but I'm wondering, I mean, how do you make life a lot easier in this building for seniors than any other building for the general public? How is this building actually designed and targeted for seniors?
Okay, I'll let the architect answer that because, again, these guys have a lot of these buildings, so he's going to be much better at it than I.
Thank you, Deb.
I think I'll actually, if I could like to defer this one to Greg Wonke, who's our senior project designer, who really does know these facilities inside and out. I mean, I'm quite familiar with them myself, but he's got about another 20 years experience on me. So I think if you can chime in, that would better suit your needs.
Can you hear me? This is Greg.
Yes.
All right. So, yeah, we've done a lot of senior buildings. Senior apartments are a little bit different than the residential care facility. It's basically just apartments with a very good architectural flavor. All the units have decks and patios. Most of the common area is actually provided in the recreation building and in the pool area.
Greg, let me interject here. This is Brandon.
Okay.
I'm helping out on the project as well. We also incorporated various things, like we wanted to make sure as a senior project, every resident would be able to drive in and go straight up to their apartment without being exposed to the elements. So every single unit does have an underground parking space. We made sure to have the ceilings not at 9 feet, but correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, we had adjusted it to 10-foot ceilings.
The B building has 10-foot ceilings. The A buildings have 9-foot ceilings.
And we had to make that adjustment for the height limit.
Yeah, exactly. But go ahead.
As well, the unit mix we adjusted for a senior audience. A lot of 2 bedrooms, not as many 3 bedrooms. The senior population going into these communities tend to be downsizing. And as you see on the plans, we have ample storage because that is, of course, the next thing they will need.
There's also
another thing that I'll add is that we haven't really touched on it, but the the L-shaped buildings mirroring each other create a lovely outdoor garden, in the center, the courtyard. And they've filled that with bocce courts, outdoor patios, lanais, arbors, fountains, sport courts. There's shade pavilions, pet parks. They even have a pet park, in the care facility, bocce courts, and the lush landscaping. And then on the residential care facility, both facilities have movie theaters, but the residential care facility has a beauty salon, doctor's office, concierge, and fire pits, a putting green. So there's all kinds of nice things to attract residents.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. I mean, I think the courtyards are a key component of all this assembly here. Now, my other question is, and I asked this before to Haley, can you give me a sense of scale, the length of those buildings?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so each leg of the A buildings are about 200 feet long. And each leg of the one leg of the B building's 200 and the other is 180. If you measure, the far part of the leg.
So that brings the internal hallways or corridors to what length?
About 180 feet on the long ones, 160 feet on the short ones.
And they only have one window at the end?
Yes, one window at each end.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Actually, am I still there? There will be skylights on the upper level in the corridor.
Thank you. Charles, do you have questions as well?
Yeah, and most of what I have is comments, so that'll be in the next part of this. But I'm going to dovetail off a question that Commissioner Gorney brought to light, which was, boy, these look like fully developed, ready to build plans. How married are you to this? And I'm talking, let me clarify two things first so that you'll understand some of my thinking. I'm the one non-architect on the commission, so called a resident at large. So I'm thinking of this from the, the everyday Walnut Creek citizen looking at projects, and I will speak in non-architectural terms, although I keep learning from my fellow commissioners, which is awesome. And I'm speaking more to the residential, the senior housing piece, because I don't have as many questions or comments on the residential care facility. How married are you to the design of the buildings, the four very large L-shaped buildings, basically taking up, sounds like it's about 2 football fields worth of residential housing. How married are you to this design? How flexible are you to doing something different at this stage?
I'll take the first crack at that. And again, we've been at this since November. Actually, we started sooner than that, but we went to City Council in November of 2019. This site, in the city of Walnut Creek, you have to do a lot of engineering before you can submit an application. You have to have all these things thought out. So we've actually done a lot of engineering on the site, and then we had to re-engineer it when we resubmitted, and took off that level of the top level, the 4th floor on that front building. So a lot of work's been done already.
Great, thank you.
Hi. Okay. So,
Yeah, that's all I had question wise.
okay, great.
Thank
So
you.
I have a couple questions. Was there any consideration for somehow providing access to that canal trail that occurs, or giving people opportunities for connectivity on that side?
You know, the staff actually brought that up at one time, and recently I talked to Steve Waymeyer about that. But there is a connection at Oak Grove to the canal. So literally, you take Mitchell over to Oak Grove, and then you can cross the canal. There is another connection at Wiggett. So initially our thought was it doesn't really make sense to put another connection, one parcel in from Oak Grove Road. We're trying to decide. There is a multimodal plan for the Shadelands that hasn't been adopted yet, but it's in the final. Actually, I think it goes to council soon. I don't know, Haley, if you know that, but and it provides for, some offsite work in the Shadelands, connecting sidewalks, and a lot of different things. And it actually talks about beefing up the connection at Oak Grove, because there's a pinch point there apparently. But in talking to staff, my understanding is that that's probably, initially when we got the comment, the concern was these are seniors, and Oakmont, says that the biggest concern when you're a senior and you're downsizing and moving away from your house is one of safety. You want to make sure that you're safe. So we didn't feel like it was appropriate to put an easement through the property for access to the canal. Again, because we're one parcel off of Oak Grove. And then secondly, if it is, we actually got a comment back from staff stating that, no, we'd like for you to evaluate it, but it would be for your residents, not for the public. And we don't see the value in creating an easement through, creating a bridge over the canal just for the benefit of our residents. We're probably better off trying to do some other things that might need to be done in Shadelands, like connect a sidewalk or two.
Okay. And I'm guessing that some of this is for the landscape architect, the big swaths of green are where you're doing your bioretention efforts. Is that what some of those are?
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. I couldn't get my mute off. Yes. If you look at the detailed planting plans, there are several stormwater areas, treatment areas that are in those, you're seeing like the big green swath areas. Mm-hmm. And we do have some trees, the trees that would be able to fit within those areas, more shrub trees in those areas. But yeah, they are mostly stormwater, but we're trying to make them as attractive as possible.
Okay. All right. And while I have you, Jennifer, when we're on, so if I'm looking at Mitchell Drive and I'm paying attention for the moment to the frontage between Mitchell Drive and building B1, it indicates there's a 5-foot metal fence. And I'm guessing the intention for that is privacy for those ground floor units. But what happens between the 5-foot metal fence and the B1 building? Like, is that just planting and prettiness, or is there like
it is planting and prettiness, but there's also there's a pet park there. Mm-hmm. And with a shade structure and a sitting area, and there's some privacy for the tenants that will have patios on the lower floor there. There's some shrubs that are sort of medium height to give them a little privacy, but they could still sit and watch the world go by. And then also prettiness, really, to make the street front attractive.
Okay. And then are there dining opportunities? I see it. I see the outdoor dining for the residential care facility. Is there any eating opportunities in the other portion of the site?
There are, so there's, you know, we're calling them courtyards between like B1 and B2 and A1 and A2, where there's some larger patio areas where we will have tables with umbrellas. So that opportunity is there for the residents.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for our applicant? Wonderful. Okay, so at this time, we're going to open it up for public comment. So being as we're in our Zoom platform, if anyone has a comment, they can use the raise hand feature. And at that point, we will take you off of mute and you can make your comment. I will also reiterate that number. Let me pull that up real quickly. So to get access to our Zoom meeting, our ID is 958-5554-5035, and the login password is 104114. And you can also join by phone. That number is 1-669-900-6833. So we'll give it a second to see if we have interest in that.
Yeah, there may be a delay on the TV feed, so we'll wait just a second for that. But Deb, could you help me out? Could I get the names of the speakers? Okay, never mind. Chip's got them.
Oh, okay. I was just
we're set.
I'll email
Okay.
it to you. Yeah, cool.
I'm good to go. Let's see, Casey, could you do me a favor and state that phone number one more time?
Yes. So the phone number is 1-669-900-6833.
Okay, we're not getting any emails that came in, and we're not getting any phone calls, and no one else is chiming in.
Great.
No raising hands, so we're good.
Okay, so then we're going to bring it back to the commission for our comments. Does anyone desperately want to go first? Okay, I'm going to go then. That's right. Okay, so one of the things that I really noticed about the site plan, and I think that a couple of our commissioners have alluded to it already, is that it seems really building dominant. And I know that in the presentation, there was a reference to Stone Ridge Creek, and in that project, it's very like campus designed. So it's almost like there's a landscape experience that is primary. And yes, the buildings are obviously a significant presence on that campus, but I don't feel as much of that here. It does feel like an apartment complex that we are branding for seniors. I really appreciate that there are a lot of amenities. I think that's great. I like the bocce and the rec facility, but I can't help but feel like a lot of them are on the outskirts of the building, and they occur between what appears to be a pretty significant edge of the building that doesn't have a lot of access points and like a roadway or parking stalls. And I think, you know, I'm noticing the garden area that's below the rec facility. And I know that there's like some shade structures and pet parks. So I love that we're effectively using the space and amenitizing things, which is really great. But just based on the site plan, they don't feel that integrated with the function of the site. So that's something that I'd like to see maybe resolved a little bit more, so that the experience of the outdoor is a little more related to the building. And like maybe people, I see there's some good access from people's patios to the walkway, but then it feels like it's missing a little bit of this like campus synergy feel. But I do appreciate that the rec center is serving as the heart. And I think that creating great connectivity to the rec center would start to help. So maybe there's like passageways through the building or something. So that's just the high level thing that I'm really reacting to. I feel as though 55 and up isn't really that old. I think a lot of times, and maybe the age range that's I is likely to come in here is higher. But for me, I mean, my folks are a lot older than that, and they're really active, and they would definitely want a connection to the trail. And I think one of the things that's so successful about Viamonte is the proximity to the shopping center, so that people can still feel vital and like they're getting places on their own. So I think I like that there's a sport courts, because I do think there's an active feature there that I really want to make sure is captured. Those are my things about the site plan. In regards to the, or one more site plan thing, the entry off of Mitchell, the primary entry, the immediate connection to the residential care facility feels a little uncomfortable. It's almost like if you're coming in, you have to make a really quick decision to go to the care facility, in which case then maybe you're better off just going to the other entry, but you know what I mean? So just that interface of the residential care facility driveway and then the main access from Mitchell to the apartment site feels a little risky or something. And then the architecture, I think it felt maybe a little overly eclectic for me. I saw that it seemed to have a modern appeal with a lot of the linear lines, and I like that. But then there was these kind of unexpected arches, and I have nothing against arches, but I think I'm looking for more of a conversation between the two. And I realize that's a really lofty thing to say, but I'm just, it feels a little random. And even like the movement of the colors, I like the color palette, but there's no predictability to it. But I think it gives it some depth, but I'd like it to be maybe a little bit more of a pattern and intentional, so that when I look at the architecture, I know where I'm supposed to go. Especially in such a building dominant site, you're very dependent on the architecture providing your wayfinding. That's it. Those are my comments. Thank you. All right, who's next? Charles.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to preface with, if I look at the housing side of the development as an apartment complex, it's pretty good looking. I like the colors. I like the materials. I fundamentally am good with the architecture. I completely agree with Chair Case. Made me feel good that I picked up on it too, as the amateur. The arches seemed out of place. That was my one comment on the overall architecture. But so as a set of apartment buildings, looks good. However, and I'll flip, the residential care facility, I think it looks good and it fits within what we have been developing in the Shadelands. When I think about the residential 55 plus side of the area, by the way, I'm 55 plus, so thank you, Chair Case, again, I agree completely with you. When I look at that development, it's precedent setting. So, and someone chime in if I'm mistaken, this would be the first purely residential development in the Shadelands Business Park. And so when I think of something that sets a whole new precedent for an area of the city such as this, then I'm not as happy with a really nice looking apartment complex, because I see that all over the city anyway. Somewhat reminds me a little of the Brio or the Lyric in terms of style. Do all four of these buildings need to be a consistent sized and shaped L? I see why you would do it, to maximize the number of units on the land. Could they be different shapes? Do they have to be purely vertical like all the other apartment buildings in town? Could these buildings be terraced? Again, I realize this would come at the cost of the density, but I'm throwing that out there because whatever this ends up being, I foresee more of this happening in the Shadelands. And once we let something go up with a certain style, we set precedent. So that's my thoughts on the architecture. That's why I asked earlier, you know, are you married to this design? I granted a whole lot of work went into it, but boy, wouldn't it be great if the first residential development in the Shadelands was really unique and something special that would spur on more of that in the Shadelands, if that's where the Shadelands is going to end up going. From a site plan perspective, it is, I agree, that it is very building centric. One of the things that I guess I'm not a fan of, and I don't know how you change it with the current site plan. So you've got these 4 buildings and then you've got the road going around it with the parking spaces. I feel like I'd be going up to a Courtyard Marriott. And I'm not saying that as a negative or a slight. Those are very nice hotels, but it kind of gives it almost more of a hotel feel to me with the drive around the buildings with the parking spaces right out there close to the units. I think I commented already on the colors, the materials. On tree removal, there's 7 highly protected coming out. I noticed some of them, 2 or 3 of them seem to be near 2 or 3 highly protected that are staying. I would just ask, unless those trees are really going to die or in imminent danger of falling down, is there any way we can save those highly protected trees? That would certainly be nice. And I think the landscape, like the best part of the landscape seems to be on the courtyards and in the center of the residential care facility, which I think, you know, as a resident, that would completely make sense. But I think we heard some comments before about kind of places to stop within the site that I think we're losing some landscape possibility when I look at this U-shaped drive with parking spaces, and the other commissioners will tell you I don't usually have a lot to say about the landscaping, but I feel in this case, I think there's something better we can do. I don't know what that better is because that's certainly not my area of expertise, but I think, again, there's something to me with there's very little landscape between the edge of these buildings and this driveway parking lot. And I think something perhaps could be redesigned there. And I think with that, those are all my comments. Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Gorney, you look ready and
Yeah, I'm ready to go. You know, I'm generally okay with the use. I think that it's going to be even tougher in Shadelands after COVID-19. And again, the amenities, the decks, the common areas, all the rec things, theaters and all that, you know, having a pet area, bocce courts, I think that's all really, really positive. A couple of detail things and a couple of bigger ones. It seems like it's under handicap parked on the surface. If you look at people coming in, my wife just fractured her pelvis the other day and she's can barely, you know, walk. And it seems like there's only like one in front of each building. It seemed like there's a couple places where there's doubles, but I think you can kind of add some. And also I think the parallel parking is going to be an issue. I know you have to jam parking in there, but I would make sure that those spaces are very large or try to replace them with some straight in parking. I'm going to dovetail on something that I know Carlos is going to say, which is windows at the end of the hallways on these long corridors. One of them has a stairway at the very end. It seems like some shifting could be done to be able to have light always at the end. Even the Marriott Residence Inn that I stay at has that. So I think it's important to look at that on these long hallways, not just on the upper floor. You mentioned the gatehouse being a lovely object. I don't think it's lovely at all. I think it's just a box with a big roof, an oversized roof on it. If it's going to be something that's lovely, I think more attention needs to go into the architecture on that. As it comes back, I think an important part of this building is going to be the lighting. And so as that comes back, both in landscape and on the buildings, the scale of the lighting and what kind of lighting it is going to be critical to look at. I agree with staff's recommendations on page 8 and 9. They talk about additional architectural features on the street facade. I wouldn't add more features. I would make sure that the features that are there are coordinated well. And also on page 9, they talk about a continuous uniform cornice element across all elevations. Again, I wouldn't want to have one single cornice line. I think the variety is good. It just needs to be worked out that it seems a little arbitrary right now. So I think it needs to have a little bit more attention to how those, how it hits the sky. I think that's really important. In general, there's some stone or some woods and some stucco. I don't think the materials are coordinated yet. And I think more attention needs to go into that. The one thing that the architect said was that this is meant to be a modern expression of the building. I agree with Charles in that. I think it seems more hotel-like. And there is one very major building that was just done, which is the Viamonte or Sequoia, whichever it's called. And that set the precedence for the architecture here. And this is a very, very different building. And I wish it had more of that. I was amazed when that building came through at the strength of the materials, the way the windows are integrated into the architecture versus just being holes in stucco walls with a stucco color and another stucco thing outside of it. I just think that building is an amazing building, and I don't think this one comes near it in the architecture. And if we're talking about setting a precedence, I think more attention needs to go to the architecture. It's like, we talk about arches. I don't like the arches so much in stucco, but when you have a lot of stone on the base and you have to cap the stone with something, an arch makes sense, but it needs to look like a real arch with real strength of stone around it, so it looks like it makes sense. At the moment, I think a lot of them are ill proportioned. That's something that can be fixed. There's too much going on the rec center. I think particularly on the west and the east, little roofs, fake arches. I think more attention needs to go on that. I understand why the upper floor is kind of stepped in, but you get those little roofs on the sides, and we used to call it the elephant in the tutu. And I just think that it needs to have a little more attention on that. And things like the one I mentioned, elevation, the A elevation with that upper right, where that, I think if that's going to be an entry and you want people to go there, or having a narrow entry with 20-foot tall stone columns and what I would call an ill-proportioned arch on the top is not the answer. So I think the architecture needs work there. Again, there's just some parapets that I think need help. Some of them are just kind of square capped. I think the architect can work on those. It just seems to me, and the hard thing about this building is it's not Viamonte. Viamonte's lucky because it's on a corner. And this building being a deep set lot, you really do need to be able to get the fire trucks in there. And unfortunately, that means it's going to have a lot more paving. If you look at Viamonte, the roads form the paving. And so how that's going to work out, I do not know, but we can continue to talk about it. Just overall, I don't really like the architecture, and there's too many colors, too many materials. And that arch on the top of the residential care, that sort of arch with the 3 windows, and then it's too tall and the curve is wrong, and there's too much forehead on top of it. And it's just a mess in my opinion. I think that needs a lot of work. Now, I will say, if this goes forward, the Planning Commission, which I think it should, 2 things. I think that they need to look at the site plan, and there's changes we talked about on the site plan. Is this the right massing? Is this the right density for this? And I think they need to look at that. And if they say, no, it isn't, then I think it should be some redesign and come back to both design review and Planning Commission. But I'd be curious, I kind of hate to say no at this point and bring it back to us without getting them a chance to weigh in. But I'd also like them to look at it very severely with the eye of, does it need more work to be able to make it work better? I do believe that the project is really maxed out, and that it's to its detriment. It's just too much building on there. you know, carving out some corners or some little pieces somewhere would just break it up so much better. And I think Planning Commission also needs to look at how many sites are going to be eligible for this type of development in Shadelands. I mean, I know it's everything within 750 of Oak Grove and Ignacio Valley Road, but if you take the combination of all those sites and you did projects like this, it would have an impact on Ignacio Valley Road, and it would have an impact on the city. And I think that I understand why council wants more housing. I agree, it's a great idea, but I think Planning Commission needs to look at that a little more carefully in the context of this building. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, Carlos?
Well, I think you all have made an excellent summary. My impression, I had to write this down, is that I do like the urban design of the buildings. I do like the shape of the buildings. I do like the courtyards. I like the sequencing of the spaces. So I'm in favor of that, with a caveat. The scale, I think the scale is overdone. I think it's massive. So if there could be something done regarding the scale and keeping the concept of the courtyard related to the recreational center, central point, and connectivity to Mitchell, I am all for it. When I talk massiveness, my major concern is not the massiveness itself, but the length of those corridors, dark corridors, 180 feet corridors. And if you could break those masses, and if you could bring some lighting between the buildings, I think that wouldn't take too much, but that would be a great feature to actually create an additional element on the architecture itself and the experience of the building. Those corridors, and I think Charles mentioned it, and I think Commissioner Gorney mentioned it. It's that hotel feeling on the outside taken to the inside on those corridors. So if you could bring something more human to those corridors, more natural light, more ventilation, I think that would be a great addition to this project. So that's my major concern. I think the architecture itself needs a lot of coordination between its elements. I think the colors got to be coordinated as well. For me, the scale is a huge unknown here. I wish I would have seen the model that Commissioner Gorney was asking for, or at least sections that related this building with the entire site and related this building to the neighboring buildings. I love to see sections. I love to see what we're doing to the city with any new piece that we add to the city. Basically, that's it. I mean, I would be repeating what the other commissioners have said, but scale and probably breaking that building into those L's into, I don't know how many pieces, but bringing in more light to those corridors could be a great addition for the quality of the project.
Okay, thank you. Joseph.
Yeah, I just want to dovetail on that. It almost seems like on the floors, you could almost remove a unit and have like a small amenity on the floor where some couches and stuff for people to be able to gather with some windows that, you know, kind of breaks up the corridor with something that's a little different versus just having a complete line of rooms. And I will say again, I understand that this went to council and everybody's been looking at it for a year. A study session would have been extremely helpful with design review. I think our arms are being a little tied here and our hands are being tied. And I think I understand that the city's got all these rules before it can be a complete application, but on a project this important, the study session with design review should be primary on that list.
Okay, so our charge is to determine whether or not it can move on to Planning Commission. Is that correct? And aside from that, it's just our comments are noted. And okay, so I heard Commissioner Gorney say he's comfortable sending it to Planning Commission. I am as well. Does anyone have thoughts on that? Commissioner Carling.
Just a question. So some encapsulation or summary of our comments are going to get passed along with the sending it off to Planning Commission. Is that correct?
Yeah, there'll be a section in the staff report to Planning Commission where I will summarize all of these comments.
Great, then I'm comfortable as well.
A lot of them actually watch our meeting too, which I think is good.
I am comfortable as well. I'm for it.
Great. Okay. So that sounds to me like we're in agreement. It's going to head on to Planning Commission, then we get an opportunity to see it again. Wonderful. Okay. So with that, we're going to move on to our next item. Thank you, staff and applicant. Commission considerations. So this is for items that are not required to be publicly noticed. Anything tonight, Mr.
There are none, Madam Chair.
All right, then we'll move on to commission member and staff reports or announcements. Anything there?
Any from any of the commissioners?
Well,
Joe?
Casey and I have looked at the little parklet in front of the Mercedes dealership and pretty much given it a thumbs up at this point after a couple of meetings and a Zoom meeting, and also approved some of the colors over at the Ignacio Center. So those things are moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Good, and thank you for your time on that. I know it hasn't been real straightforward, so appreciate your time going back out there and looking up the details.
I brought my kids too. They were fascinated. Like, which color do you like, guys? Which color? Charles, did you have something to say?
Yeah, is there, and this is dovetailing off of Commissioner Gorney's comment as well. Pardon me, let me turn this paging thing off. Is there a possibility to send a formal request to City Council that perhaps for developments of this significance, that a study session with design would happen earlier on, so that in such a large development, the applicant isn't sent off working on design concepts for a year before the design study session happens with DRC.
We could certainly do that. We had some changes in staffing and so forth, and we're still going through that. But yeah, this is probably a good example of bringing it in front of a design review commission early on.
Thank you.
Casey, are you comfortable working with staff on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, I think part of our purview is site planning, right? So, I mean, an opportunity for us to weigh in on just how the buildings relate to everything else is hard to do when it is, you can see it's such a baked plan.
We can also ask them to provide certain information, whether it's a massing model or whatever, so we have a better understanding before we're pushing it forward.
I even feel like I would be comfortable with pretty diagrammatic stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like they could just be like green landscape. We don't need to see, but just the association of the programming elements is important,
Yeah.
because then it gives us a chance to kind of rearrange the puzzle pieces hypothetically and just understand. I think sometimes too, just understanding how they got to where they are helps. So if we get to be a part of that.
Yeah, and at some level, it's unfair to the applicant too, with the process as it is, because we're chiming in after they spent all that time and money coming up with their plans.
Right.
Yeah, that's a point well taken. If there are no other announcements or reports, I've got just a couple things. June 16th, just write that on your calendar, circle that date. That's the date that will be moving back into the council chamber. So that will be for commissioners only. I'll be here as well. Staff applicants will continue to do Zoom. We'll take public comment over Zoom. Also, we'll be taking public comment in person here at City Hall as well. So it'll be kind of a new experience, but circle that date. And then to Charles, I'll get a hold of Brian, but we'll need to do a sign subcommittee on that date as well. So that's all I have.
Okay, all right. Thanks, everyone. We will adjourn.
Thank you. Thanks,
So
Jason.
much.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, everybody.